Three, two, one. We are live.
This is 2OF Entertainment.
I like that. If your anthem wasn't like, copywritten, we could just play the Canadian anthem instead.
Yeah. Well, they keep changing the damn thing anyway. They
Oh,
keep
okay, never mind.
changing the words. It depends on who's
Okay.
singing it, and I don't know. It gets ridiculous after a while.
Okay.
I started tapping my foot after a while, so I just said, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
It's like, hey, I like the beat. This is hip, baby. This is hip. I like it.
It has a distinct sound to it, and
Very cool.
I don't mind it. I got
There you go.
a new blue background.
I like your background. It's very let's take a look at that. Very space, very like, look, we're gonna save the world. I like it. Very nice.
We are actually zipping around the world, which is what we're trying to do.
Very nice.
Yeah, and we have a great artist today, and Judy Blue Anderson is her name.
Okay.
And she's a landscape painter from Hamilton, Ontario area. And wow, I look at this. This is This is an artist who paints like with her whole body. Like you just,
wow.
It just moves, and there's lots of energy all through the whole work. So we will talk to her about her work. Yeah, we just bring her. We're gonna ask her about her name.
Judy Blue Anderson. It's like I knew the guy who who painted the blue, the blue boy Picasso, and he said he needed the money. So I'm assuming this is a whole different thing for her name, though. So I'm excited.
Yeah, well, blue in the day was a very rare color to use. Expensive, very expensive color. So maybe that's the other reason for the word blue. It was expensive.
Very cool.
Maybe
I'll be excited.
What we talk about.
It's this is getting to be too ritzy. So when she comes in, I'm just going to have to leave because this is now too much of a ritzy show for me.
I don't know. We're still working our way up the ladder.
There you go. And there's Judith, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, great.
Judith, let me just say this, and I'm going to disappear because you're going to get onto a sophisticated level, art, and I can only finger paint. Have a wonderful show. I will see you at the end with my 3 favorite questions, and Paul knows what they are, so he's chuckling. And if you've seen any of these shows, you know what they are. And we'll talk to you later. Enjoy your show and have a great show.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks. Well, good day to you. Yeah. I had to put this bluish background in the background for today. We're just going to.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, it gives us a little bit more worldly feel. We are starting to move around the world, I guess, with our art interviews, which is quite impressive. I'm quite, I don't know. It's quite satisfying to know that we can reach out past our borders a little bit with some great Canadian art. The world needs to know that we have some great artists, and you being a very fine artist yourself here, and we're going to talk about your work. I do have to ask you, where does the blue come in your name? Besides in the middle between your Judy and the Anderson, we got the.
Well, when I'm showing, people always think it's because my work is predominantly blue in color, which is I just happen to like sky. So there is always a lot of blue sky and water. That has nothing to do with it, but I go with it if that's the conversation. Yeah. It's a nickname I picked up as a teenager. I'll tell my age because it's from the song Sweet from Judy Blue Eyes, which I do not have. And it stuck with me with really close friends throughout most of my life. But I started using it about, I don't know, it's quite a few years ago now as my art tag, only because there's at least 3 Judy Andersons in Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
Art shows. There's one in Manitoba, and I'm sure there's more of us. It's like Jane Smith. It's the most common name on the planet, which I'm sure my mother didn't think so at the time. Yeah. But I got into a position where another Judy Anderson, who's fairly geographically close to me here, we got mixed up at shows. People would come to see her thinking it was me, and it was just easier to throw in something else. And since I already had that tag, I kept it for my artwork.
Yeah, great. It's a great branding idea as well, and it is a problem for a number of I have another friend who's actually a member who's a blacksmith, and they have the exact same name, and they never used to live too far apart. They used to go to the same shows, so they get mixed up as to the same names, and people are just understanding who is who, and it's really hard to differentiate yourself. I mean, it's hard enough as an artist already to get awareness about your work, but then when you have another one who's another artist who is, you know, clamoring after the same clientele, and
Right.
they're not the same venues, it's really tough to you know, keep your name, but add positive to what you do, you know. And I think
It's always a good conversation starter too at shows when I've got my banner with my name and, you know, well, were your parents hippies? No, they were as like square as you can get, things like that. But yeah, it's
well,
just,
you can build on it. I wear blue jeans. You can do all kinds of blue
that's
sky,
right.
pie
Yeah.
in the sky, blue sky. But yeah, today we're just gonna talk about some of your stuff that's happening here. I'm actually gonna get Stephen just to start the first image up. It's like wow, and we'll stay on this one for a little bit and talk about the energy that's happening in your work. So are you a palette knife painter, brush painter?
I started off as a brush painter. Most of my 99% of my work is really like mostly acrylic. And so everything you're seeing today is acrylic. But what I started to do, I was a brush painter at the beginning, and I found my work was getting tight and a little realistic, and it wasn't really the direction I wanted my work to go. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just not what I wanted to do. And I found the palette knife, I couldn't be that tight, and I couldn't be that constricted in the way my movements were. So what I typically do now, especially on this is probably as big as I work right now, 30 by 60. I'll lay down the back with brush, so there's color everywhere, kind of just a sketch. So tonally, it's what I want, and then I work into the palette knife as I get closer to the surface and the layers up. So it's a little bit impasto, and it's a little bit rougher and messier, and I find that helps me give the impression of movement in my painting.
Yeah. No, I like it. It has that. There's a directional. I don't know. I'll call lack of words, scratchiness to it. That there's a. You can feel the rhythms that are happening in the grasses and the rock, and there's some rhythms that are happening there that are that wouldn't be there if you didn't use the knife to get in there and give that direction and the shape. I mean, this thing is all held together with really lovely shapes that hold the whole piece together. So it's a and it still feels really young country. You're out there in the woods and it's kind of it's really hard to paint a Canadian landscape and not be a Tom Thompson or a McDonald, right?
It's true. It's very true.
Especially if you're from Ontario and it's the fall, you just fall into those darn colors and you go, oh my God, I've seen this before 1,200 times.
Yeah.
And so how do you make it your own, right? How do you make it your own response to the landscape? And when you have predecessors that were prolific and they're iconic, it's really hard to find your own voice, I guess, for lack of words, in how you see a landscape and interpret it. And I think you do it very well, finding your own rhythms and things that you need to look for. Like Lauren Harris had a lot of his own rhythms, and you kind of figured that out, right? When you look at his work, you could just spot it from a mile away.
And a lot of these pieces, so this is studio work, these bigger pieces, these are actually a little bit mixed media, and you have to look very closely to find it. But all the rocks are initially built up of pages out of a textbook. So that if you look really closely, there's text in there, and maybe the odd letter shows through. Sometimes my trees are...
Excuse me.
Sorry about your cold. It's too bad.
Oh, I'm just suffering here. They're trying to get through it. We'll get through.
Sometimes my trees are made of brown craft paper underneath and then built up. Sometimes it's completely obliterated by the time I'm finished, but sometimes you can see little hints of mixed media coming through.
Okay. So does some of the text, is it important what text shows through?
It doesn't mean anything. It's just, it means something only in the source. It's an old teaching manual of my mother's that's so crisp and so brittle now that there's nothing you could do with it as a book anyway. So I don't feel terrible in destroying it.
Right.
But the words and the verbiage, completely random. It's kids' stories and poems and history lessons, and it's completely random. I almost just use it as a mid-gray just because of the way the type looks and the color of the paper is a bit yellow. So it's kind of my mid-tone in my rocks in a lot of these paintings.
So these pieces, do you work on canvas or do you work on panel?
I tend to do more canvas right now, although I do like working on panel, and I've started to use them a little bit for my smaller ones. I'm not gentle when I paint. So I do a lot of scraping and I treat my brushes badly and I scrub things and I use my hands and mush stuff around. So I find the panel really nice for that because I can be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, part of it is this flexibility of the canvas will start maybe cracking your surfaces that you so do you use a GAC 100 type of material to adhere your papers to your surface, or what do you use?
I basically use decoupage glue.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't even think of what it's called now. Mod Podge or
Yep.
whatever. That I typically use that for adhering.
Yeah, it's got. Yeah, I think if there's some, I guess if there's some acrylic in it, in the pigment, it has flexibility.
Yeah.
It's like if you put plaster on a canvas, it'll eventually crack.
Yes, I learned that when I was young. When I tried to do a bunch of sort of modeling textural things, I did find out that it does actually just chip and fall.
You can build up with modeling gels that are that are a bit more forgiving than that. But well, this one I have a really lovely feel for. It feels like I want to go there, and it feels rough country like, and it.
This is actually, so this is a bit sort of near North Ontario. It is in the North Channel on Lake Huron, sort of the east side of the North Channel, for anybody who knows that area, up around the west side of Killarney, south of Espanola. There's a group of painters and friends. We've been going for about 14 years to this area for a week in July, on and off. I have missed a few years. And typically we just go and plein air paint for the week. Nice. And then, so this bigger pieces are brought back and worked up in the studio from those sketches and those small panels that I do when I'm up there.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And the plein air thing, does that really help you when you get back into the studio, that you've experienced that?
I find it really helpful. So I get out while I can, although I have to say I'm a bit of a fair weather plein air painter. I don't like painting in rainstorms and windstorms and things like that. But I do find that if I do a small sketch, some of them I've used them basically literally exactly the same cropping and everything back in the studio, but mostly they're just to get the feel of the place, to get the clouds, to get the colors of the day. And then I also do a pencil sketch. Yeah. If I do nothing else, I do a pencil sketch before I start to get my composition in my areas. I do take lots and lots of photographs. They're not usually my primary source of reference when I paint. I try to combine all three of those, like a sketch, a painting sketch, and the photograph, because I'm mostly true to what I'm painting, but I do take liberties. If a tree's in the wrong place, Mother Nature, I'm sorry, it's in the wrong place and it's not getting painted.
Move it over, yeah.
Yeah, just move it over to the left a little bit. So
I think that's when you start making things your own, is when you start rearranging and using these as elements and being inspired by weather, black flies, no-see-ums, and bugs and things that adhere themselves to your plein air paintings. When I come back in it won't be so much when I come back from mine. I have a carrying box. I don't know how they get inside the carrying box.
They do, though. They do. They're invasive. I was out on Lake Ontario. I think it was last weekend for my first plein air venture outside, and I was on the beach, and I was painting on a little 8x10 canvas board or masonite board, and it flew off and landed upside down in the sand. So it's got like built-in grit now. It's what happens.
Well, that makes it of the moment.
Yeah.
You have to have things like that to experience. If you don't have those experiences, you're missing something, right? You really are. You need to feel the wind once in a while, and the power that wind has, and how you paint in a wind is really different than how you paint in other inclement weather, right?
Absolutely.
other people don't understand. Like when you go out, it's not just every day is a happy day out there.
No.
Uh, and some days you just crawl up and say, okay, I'm going to go and have a little shot of rum somewhere
Exactly.
in the back in a warm spot where it's nice and warm. But
That's it. I think it really helps with the studio work. I think it helps to retain that energy, because even going from a sketch to a painting, something is lost in translation. Sketches are fantastic, and sometimes they're stagnant when they become the big painting. So I find the plein air experience really, really helps me with that.
yeah, a lot of artists think, oh, I'll just go in the studio and I'll blow this painting up. There's 8 by 10. I'm going to make this into a big 4 foot by 5 foot. And you go, you haven't really thought about it because the scale is wrong or there's something off. You may be looking at it panoramically and you get in and your panel is square, right? So
Yep.
you have to learn to crop and figure out what is the most important part of why you stopped there and why you painted. So yeah, this is another one I feel there's yeah, it feels very dead end, like there's a good title. How important are titles to you? Like
Landscape titles are brutal. Rocks and trees, blue sky, sunny day. Like, I find it really tough. Some of them come really easily to me, and others are just drudgery. So what I do for titles typically is I have a list of just catchphrases that I hear, or something I read in a book, or just a couple of words. I think, okay, that would work for a title someday. And sometimes when I'm painting them, the title just sort of comes to me during the process. And sometimes at the end, I just stare at it and think, what the heck am I going to call this thing? I have no idea. But I think if I can remember what a painting is called, I've given it the right title. If I look at something and I think all the time, I don't know what that one was, then I have to rename it, because it doesn't have its name.
Yeah, I have different ideas about naming, and sometimes the naming can be too directive for an audience to look at, and it's too it doesn't leave enough space for them to think about what it is. Your work is somewhat abstract enough that they can read a lot of stuff into it. Like, for instance, it could be anywhere in Canada, this space. It could be in Newfoundland, this piece.
That's right.
And you wouldn't really know. But so it has a universality to the work, yet it feels very Canadian, right? And that kind of experience it's really important that you as an artist not only can depict, say, Northern Ontario, but to say this is still Canadian Shield country. It still feels Canadian, and it feels you as much as you can, as much as you can as a painter. I mean, you're communicating between your brain, your hand, and a brush or something, and you're trying to say, how do I conjure up this idea that I see and I feel? Because it's really what it's about, right? How do I feel about this moment?
Just trying to depict the impression of the place that you're either in or referenced or saw or drove by. This particular one actually is sort of the other end of the first one that you showed, just a different view in the same sort of area. But a lot of these, and I really like swamps and marshes and muddy water and that kind of thing, because there's so much going on in there. We're so ignorant of our natural world and how we need to protect it so much. But these sort of dead end places, there's so much life and so much nature in there. And a lot of them you see when you're driving up the Trans-Canada Highway, and it's just a glimpse out the window on the side of the road, and you can't actually get to it. It's not like you can pull over on the 400 and prop up your easel and go for a paint. So try to capture these things in my, resource memory for when I'm working in my studio, because I like the dead trees and the weeds and the reeds and the frogs and the bugs. The best compliment I ever got from someone, which sounds really backhanded, but she goes, "Ooh, I can feel the mosquitoes." And I thought, I did my job.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah, I can feel that. Yeah. No, it's kind of nice when you can go through, like you said, that hectic urban feel highway, yet off to the side is still is natural country around it, right?
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate so far as Canadians to be able to still do some of that. There's not just buildings all along both sides of the highway, all the way up to the north, right? All the way to, I guess it happens kind of across Canada, can be still like that. There's still some wild areas that don't have a off track four-wheelers running around and people ripping up the territory.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a little bit of an environmental concern in your work as well. Is that right?
I try really hard. It's just to bring awareness. I actually, and I think there's a plein air painting coming up a little bit later, but I did a residency in last spring in Toronto, on Toronto Island at Artscape Gibraltar, with a group of like-minded. It was sort of an environmental. It was called "I Made It Out of the Wilderness," and we talked about like what can we do with our art to bring awareness and you know. There's a lot in the area that I'm in now. There's a lot of issues with, changing farmland to subdivisions and what a disaster that is. And there's a lot of awareness around right now about how critical these places are. And we need to eat and we need to breathe from trees and we need clean drinking water. And we're fortunate enough to live in this big, huge, beautiful country, but we do take it for granted a little bit sometimes. So we have to be very careful. So I think that's why I'm drawn a little bit to landscape and natural places, because I just want to highlight how fantastic they are. And we don't stop and look enough, I think, so.
Very, very true. But it feels like there's a lot of weight put on a lot of artists' shoulders. I mean, really, is it our role to tell our politicians and our other people that make these big financial decisions, the billionaires that have their own agenda, to curb them a little bit through politics or through all kinds, whatever we can do? Is that our responsibility as artists to show that?
It has been over time for a lot of causes and a lot of issues. I mean, as a creative person, you can do what you want with it. You can make a statement. You can paint pictures that are just nice. You can do sculptures that say something.
Yeah.
I think we just do with it what we do and use it as a tool if that's what you want to do. But I mean, somebody has to talk to them.
Yeah, and if we can do it visually, I guess that speaks universally. Like,
Yeah, it
you
does.
can actually, maybe they get pressures from outside their borders, like nationally, internationally, where they say, hey, why are you cutting so many trees down? Why are you doing that? And if other countries are saying that to you and your politicians, that may carry more weight than vice versa. I don't know. But it just feels like, as an artist, you're this single little person running around, and you might have a small group of people that are doing the same thing, and you're making a little voice in one area. But if your large public galleries don't pick up your, I guess, the rhythm of what you're doing, and use that as part of their programming, and make sure that that's part of the agenda,
Yeah.
and we all feed into it, then it builds an energy that is positive. Like, okay, we need change, and it's, whoever starts it doesn't matter at a certain point, as long as it starts, right? And we have a lot of people complaining about all kinds of things, and I know artists in the past have been very political, right from Picasso's to history, all through history. They've been voices for strong statements, and how many artists have the backbone to really be that strong about something, right? To really put it out there. And I think Canadians are quite reserved. They don't have that Damien Hirst edge about them, that they're willing to stand out there and defend the one little dot that you had painted by somebody, right?
Yeah. I think for me, I try to get involved in things that maybe are making a statement a little bit. But I just want to paint our beautiful landscape and showcase it the best way that I can, and say, hey, if you don't do something, this is gone. And you like looking at these nice trees and rocks. Well, we need them to still be there. So I just want to highlight them the way that I can.
Yeah, no, it's, and I like what it's a feeling of trees. And when you in that northern country, there's a lot of trees, and they're right in front of you. You can't, you literally have to go like this to get into the bush. And
yeah.
you have to stand back because it's a wall. It's
a wall of green, and it's not fun sometimes.
No, and
it's tough.
That's why it's kind of nice. There's a bit of a pond that you can look across at something, because it gives you a bit of breathing space.
Yeah.
You need, otherwise you, like you said, it's wallpaper.
Yeah, it's just a wall of green is not appealing to me. I mean, I always say that to people, like, I hate green. It's not my favorate color.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question about green.
But that's what's out there. And that's why I like the winter. I can see through in the winter. I love, and even at this time of year, I mean, here the trees are starting to bud and it's been great. But in the winter months, it's great to get out and get reference, because you can see through, and you can see better shapes, and you can see what's on the other side and what's in the background. You can't do that in the summer. Like we said, there's a wall of trees. Unless you are crawling through the underbrush, you have to paint what's in front of you. So winter's great. This year we had no snow, so it was terrible as a painter. But I do like winter. I like the crispness of it. I can see what's going on in the background. So
yeah, and I think the black and white edge about, or umbers and white, they really define a more lineal aspect to works, right? You still need volume and shape, but you're dealing with a lot of, like this case, a lot of vertical striking of shapes, which can be a problem because they do set up rhythms. So all of a sudden there's the spacing equally between the trees. So many artists, especially a young artist starting out, they got to learn how to space your trees out. And yes, you're right. You can move a tree left, right, and move it up and down. But trying to get the understanding of how thick and big a tree is in the foreground to create depth in your work, and how small, and as they diminish and get thinner, and as they go to the back, right? And color and value do the same. Because otherwise, again, you're back into this wall of white with vertical striping, which becomes very abstract. If that's what you want, that's great, right? It's a planned thing, but your work still has that sweeping aspect. The sky has to be planned in first, and then you bring your trees over it. Otherwise, you can't get in behind those trees.
Yeah, I'm not, and I know a lot of painters do it, and I don't know how they sort of fill in their sky at the end. And I look at it and it looks fine. It looks great. They're doing a wonderful job. And I go, I don't know how you do that. I always have to lay down my sky first. It's just the way that I work. So
yeah, I like the sweep. I like to see the sweep of a cloud go through the back of a tree, of a tree, so you can see the start and the stop and its sweep. Otherwise, you'll see a stop. It'll stop even if you try to, you're a really good painter, you can still see the stops part when its edge comes to the edge of the tree, and then you pick up on the other side with the same color, and you pull it over the other side. You can see the stop and start. And if that's your style, and you're consistent through what you do, then it works.
It works great. It works great if it's done well. Absolutely.
Well, it's all techniques, how we learn, how we see things. We all see things differently, and that's what creates a great variety. I mean, how many different types of landscapes do we have? There's thousands of them, like many thousands of them. And we all paint a little differently. Some more realistically, others more, I guess, the energy aspect. I want to feel that you got scratched when you painted. I want to feel that some want that. And then some people want that feeling with them, because maybe they can relate to that image. Others want a very pristine, idyllic painting where every reflection's the same and ideal, and it reflects exactly what you see in the foreground. And
it's great. We all paint differently because there's so much variety out there, and there's paintings for everybody, and it just shows that how individual creativity is. We're all painting forests, we're all painting trees, we're all painting lakes, but the variety of the way that it's done is phenomenal.
And I guess you see that when you go to a residency or you go painting with your group of 15 people, none of the pieces are the same. You'll be painting same areas, but excuse me, everybody sees it really differently.
And that's what's really nice about the going out and in a group with the plein air painters is, first of all, I find it the most, I'm losing what word I'm trying to say. There's no judgment. It is the most, everybody's nice. Everybody likes everybody's work. Everybody wants to see what's going on. There's no judgment. We have fun critiques. I like that. I like that. But there's no hierarchy of skill. It's, we just go out. We like to paint. We want to see what other people are doing. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think more people need to understand they can try and do more of that. If a young artist wants joining groups that have small little jaunts where they go out and experience, even within the city. Like you can go do a city sketching or go to a cafe and sit down and do drawings in a cafe while you have coffee. And then if that's your outing, right? If you don't like getting bugs and things, then just work with what you've got, right? And I think more people that do that publicly, people start accepting artists being seen more doing that.
It becomes more normalized and it's more acceptable, and people want to see what you're working on, and then I like that, and it
I,
just grows
I
from there.
always ask this when it comes to plein air painting, when you if you ever get lost in the woods, you take out your paints and start painting. Somebody will come and find you.
That's true. Very, very true.
Yeah, and has that happened to you as well, where you've been painting and you think this is a nice little quiet little area and you're painting for a while and somebody actually just shows up out of the middle of nowhere?
I don't know that I've been that remote when it happens, but certainly around here, I'm very close to the Bruce Trail, which is like a 900-kilometer trail, hiking trail that goes through from Niagara Falls to Tobermory, and it's sort of in my backyard a little stretch of it, and it's one of the places we sometimes go and paint, and there's tons of hikers and stuff. You just can't avoid the people coming up to you and what are you doing, and they look at the ugly stage, you go, oh, that's nice. Just carry on.
You're supposed to have two paintings, one
Yes.
for them when they see you.
Yes,
right?
that's it.
And when they go, you put the other one back. And you
Yeah,
start
yeah, exactly.
No, there was I think there was always a cartoon like that where the person's doing the portrait and the model wanted to see the painting, and she comes around and looks at it and he's just finishing up the stick man.
That's it, exactly.
He's been drawing for hours, so it's the same kind of thing. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. So yeah, this little sketch, this is a plein air sketch, again, from that residency I talked about on Toronto Island last spring. So it's out on the island, that's Lake Ontario, and the beach was great. There's this, I love dead trees. So there was this wonderful dead tree hanging over the lake, about ready to fall, I think, which is probably because of erosion, which is not a good thing. But I just really liked the shape of it and how it was overhanging it was a stinking hot day, so I don't think we were out too long. It's hard to find shade sometimes when you're painting outside, and that's really tough because it just gets really hot.
I never did paint well with an umbrella.
No, I can't either.
You always saw the classics, the Monets and that in the garden, and he has this huge umbrella that he'd paint under to keep the shadow. He wants the light, but keep the sunlight off of the canvas.
Yeah.
And he'd be, I guess they were quite blistering hot days, some of the days when he was painting in the garden.
And if I have to haul my stuff, it's just another thing I have to carry. So typically.
How much stuff do you haul? Like, is you got a backpack?
Backpack, but usually paint. So this is a 9x12. So this is on paper. So I seem to paint 9x12 on paper, 12x12 on paper, or 8x10 on masonite board. Those seem to be the three sizes I take when I go out. So I have a masonite. I got this thing at college. We made it when we were doing our first sketching trip outside. It's basically two pieces of masonite duct taped together like an envelope. And I keep my papers inside there with bulldog clips. And I either take an easel or a little tripod stool. And I clip my whatever I'm working, my substrate onto that board. I clip my palette onto that board with a rag. And then I just have, a water jug and my paints, and that's pretty much all I take with me.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to figure out what works well. I usually take way more than I should take.
Mm-hmm.
And oil paint's heavy. If you take everything you have in oil paint, and the tubes are large, so like this, and I look at what it is, and most of the time I probably squeeze from no more than 4 tubes.
Yeah, I know. I try to guess before I go. Am I going to need like oranges and reds today, or is it going to be a blue-brown day, or so I don't take everything. And I try to mix my grains, so I don't take 5 tubes of green and, things like that. So, but
I just find that I take way more than I need to take most of the time. But usually my car's not too far away.
I was just going to say, it depends how far I have to walk.
Leave it in the car, and
yeah,
this car smells like oil paint by the time I'm done anyway.
I'm sure.
So Yeah, I'm more of an oil painter outside. So I just found the acrylics. I used to do acrylics a little bit, and then I've switched back to oils.
Yeah. I did oils for a while. I love the blending, and I love I can make a lot of texture and things, but I don't have the patience for them.
The
I went,
drying time is something you have to
yeah,
put up. In plein air, a lot of times you don't. I hate to say it, you don't get the color exactly the way you want in plein air with oil. You have to go back in later when it dries a little bit, and if it tacks up a little bit, if you use some thinners or dryers while you're working on it, maybe in the next day you can work on the piece again at the same time of day.
yeah.
Like if you paint in the same spot for a number of times. So I don't do too much of that where I paint the same subject matter in the same spot at the same time of day over a number of days.
I don't do that
I
very
rarely
often.
do that, but I do show up in the same spot, but it's usually at a different time of day.
Yeah,
But
different weather, different everything. Yeah,
it's
I
real
find
good.
I'm,
Yeah.
s- I'm this one's a bit better. I find with acrylics, and I think a lot of people find this. I paint too dark outside. I bring it back, and I was like, "Whoa! I thought it was nice and light, and now it's this deep, heavy, dark painting." So I'm trying to get better at that. This particular, I was in Shetland, UK last September for a month, which is not greatly populated, but the cliffs and the rocks
Yeah.
and the North Sea, and oh, it's just brilliant. So this was a little beach that was near where I was staying, and these
Nice.
cliffs were phenomenal. I don't even know how high they were, but I was just a little peon compared to them. I painted this scene quite a few times and on different weather, rain, sleet, hail.
Yeah. But a suggestion for you for your color when colors are moving, wear sunglasses when you paint.
Well, my glasses go dark outside,
Yeah.
so it actually helps a little bit.
Yeah. Because I've done that before where I'll paint and then I'll come back in the studio and go, that's closer to what I wanted. Because again, the same thing, I'll maybe paint a little darker than I thought, or
Yeah,
and then through what I'm doing through my glasses, right? And when I take the glasses off, I look, that's the color I was looking
that's
for.
what I want. Yeah.
So
No, but
it compensates a little bit. It's a tried and tested thing a little bit, but
yeah,
not everybody. No, this is lovely. I love the shapes. I mean, I love that volume and the freeness of those clouds and that. You're just that's a
it's very windy there.
It felt that way. This one feels
Very
windy.
windy.
It feels windy. It feels windy. Nothing wrong with that.
And then this is just I can't remember exactly where this was from, but it's a typical, side of the road river in Ontario. There's a farmer's field and there's a sort of a hedgerow in the back of like trees delineating acres maybe, and just the scrubby brush in the front foreground where the wetland is. And it's a pretty common sort of sight that we see around here. So
Yeah. I think a lot of these little, I call them estuaries, like they're within the cities. Most cities have these little,
yeah,
swamp areas that they didn't fill them in. They
yeah,
left them that way, and you get the odd duck will land in there, and it has a bit of frog wildlife and stuff in there. And I think kids need that.
oh,
And
absolutely. And
I think everybody needs that. Otherwise everything's concrete and asphalt.
well, and that's when we run into, I mean, if we don't keep the wetlands, we run into the flooding issues that everybody complain. Like nobody wants their basement flooded, but you just paved over a wetland. So take your pick, right? We have to be a little bit more sensible. So yeah, every time I see one of these areas, it's like, oh, great. I love it.
Well, when you find them in your urban area, they're like little godsends because you don't have to go very far to find them. You can go there and experience it and do your work and then come back out. But if you had to travel a couple hundred miles to find one of those spaces, it's harder on an artist. You tend to
Yeah,
get lazy and you're looking at photos again and you're not really experiencing being out there, right? As best you
exactly.
can. Yeah.
Exactly.
So do you do a fair amount of outings each year? Like little ones, little out.
I've been trying lately. So what did I do last year? Last year, so I spent I think it was 2 weeks on Toronto Island painting out there, which was fantastic. I spent a month in Shetland last fall painting. I spent a week in July up north with my painting pals. And then I try to do sort of starting April till October. I try to get out plein air painting locally while I can.
Yeah.
This year I'm going to Ireland for a month to paint there.
Yeah, take your galoshes.
Yeah, I have
An
good,
umbrella.
good messy hiking boot. I have a good raincoat too. Shetland was just the same. So yeah, I'm accustomed to that weather for sure for working in.
There's some great painters in Ireland. There's some great Irish painters.
I like green there though. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
There's a lot of well, you definitely, it'll either make you or break you.
Exactly. No, I'm really looking
The greens are really bright.
Yeah.
But well, maybe there's a learned lesson because there's some that paint green there, so you might be able to figure that out.
No, I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, I'm trying now every year to have a good take my paints somewhere. I'm hoping actually to get down East Coast again in the fall because I really like going down there to paint as well. So
yeah, I'm hoping to get there as well. I'm hoping to go to the Rock this year. Maybe
it's lovely. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to.
Yeah.
I'll send my wife in one direction and I'll go something else.
Yeah. Again, this is the same sort of scene. I live quite close in Ontario here, and between Hamilton and Burlington, the Royal Botanical Gardens is quite close to me, which has obviously fantastic gardens for lots of flower painting, which we're doing right now. I just went and did cherry blossoms last weekend and hoping to get out and do some magnolias before they're gone. I do a few florals. I just like them, but I don't do a ton. But at this time of year, I can't help myself. But there's lots of hiking trails there. So quite often I'll just go for a hike on Sunday afternoon and take my sketchbook with me and do some little thumbnails. And so I have good reference for when I get back. But this is from a place just down the road from me, actually.
So do you go to a number of shows a year regularly?
I do outdoor exhibitions, although I'm trying to minimize those now that I'm getting older, and lugging all that stuff and putting up tents for a day in the wind doesn't really appeal to me as much as it used to. I try to do more indoor shows now. I've done some gallery shows, juried shows, square foot shows, all types of things, studio tours, wherever I can put my work out there, I will try to do it.
I think most artists have to do that. They have to really source what works for them, like the kinds of places. Some are quite happy showing in cafes and small venues, and it's 2 or 3 pieces either with a couple other people and I kind of encourage artists in their early stages of show in a group. Then you don't have to produce a lot of work. Produce 3 really good pieces. And don't try and do a whole room of 20 pieces for a show. That way you're just committed to 3 really good pieces as part of your group, and you have a show and then continue from there. And I think it slowly build up, and then you can have your own solo shows and things like that. So,
that's right.
This is probably one of your warmer colored paintings.
This is actually more recent than maybe some of the other ones. This was from last fall. And this is the first one I'd done in a long time where I didn't use the mixed media. And I just I tried to keep it as sketchy and rough. It was fall. So the reeds were all turning that lovely, ochre color. And there's some siennas in there, some reeds and things. So yeah, it is a little bit of a different palette. Probably the day I didn't take the other colors that I take.
Well, a lot of times those other colors they're underneath.
Yeah.
They're there, but they come out in around edges of things. Like they don't necessarily are the dominant color anymore. So I just find that a lot of artists take too many colors out. They take all their color palette out.
Yeah.
Rather than try and narrow it down. Are you warmer or are you cooler, and throw one other one in? But and that's only me talking. Otherwise, it just looks like there's just way too much color. Like
it's also it's the same with trying to rein in the scene. When you're first time landscape painter, and especially if you're outside, you've got this vista that's miles wide. You can't capture that. You have to really figure out what you want to talk to in that particular moment. Otherwise, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I remember giving a workshop on that, and understanding you see panoramically.
Yeah.
And if you've chosen a square palette to paint on, why did you either have to make it a diptych or triptych to get the panoramic in?
If that's what you want.
Now you're down to a square. They say, well, and they said, you need to ask yourself why I stopped there, what's the most important thing? I used to get them to write on the back of it a little bit about the scene. So
That's a good
they
idea.
have a written information about what they see, and then they turn it over and start painting. So you have a written version of what you're looking at, but then you also have when you're finished, you have a painted. Do they match, right? Did you stay to your story that you wrote on the other side? So it's just little crutches that we can build into our work. But later on, what's really nice about it is that becomes the provenance of
Yes.
a piece of work, because you've actually written something about that piece of work that becomes really important to the buyer later on, because it could be 20 years down the road, but it'll also put your mind back at that moment of painting because you wrote something about it. It's like studying for an exam. If you don't sit down and really write stuff out on a regular, you can't remember stuff for the exam. And I think writing becomes really important for artists if they can do it even in point form.
That's
It's
right. Well,
good.
that's why I find the sketches really help too, especially when you're plein air,
Exactly.
to narrow down what you're going to try to capture. Otherwise, if you just start painting, you're all over the place. And then you make notes on your sketch, the dark clouds or light clouds, or
Yep.
I don't know, sun was from the left or whatever. So if you need to sort of rein in or work on it later, or you have all sort of that kind of reference too. So I find that
This,
really
yeah,
helpful.
this becomes important for galleries as well, because they like to see, where did the idea come from? And a lot of times can you show us the sketch for that painting? So now how important is the sketch that Tom Thompson did for a painting that he did? Really
Exactly.
important. It's
Yeah.
becoming, because then it shows that he was there at the moment, and in his studio he did this painting from these sketches and these drawings. So it shows that it's been premeditated. Like there's
Yes.
premeditation, it's been thought out, it's on purpose. And I think artists understanding that that's where they've got to go with this stuff. Put your energy in it right from the very beginning, and you'll get a great piece out at the other end. Yeah. This one's a little on the bluer side. You had another one that was like this, probably from the same.
Probably around the same time they were painted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same sort of scene. It
But
could
just
have
the
been
color's just a little different. I love the yellow, what's left over the trees in there. They're not jumping out yellow in my eyes, like bright, but they're at the end of they're
it's
just,
the end of the season where there's those few leaves stuck on the tree that are still, they're just hanging in there. They're gonna they're gonna make it. But
yeah, they're gonna make it. But it's nice though, because it's got that light complement to the blue in the sky, and there's just a little bit of extra color in the top edge of that page, and just we're kind of moving along here, but
yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
I wanted to get to this one's a little bit warmer, and again, you love squares.
I
Going
really
to
like squares, and it's tough as a landscape painter because people just they don't think square when they think landscape, but I really like squares.
you can always put two together, two squares.
Could do. Yeah.
Yeah, no round. I found round is really hard for me to do.
I did 2 round paintings just this spring for the Pie Art Square Show that's held here in the East End of Toronto, and it was a challenge actually for me to.
Yeah,
I was really happy with. I didn't put any in for the slideshow. I was really happy with the way they turned out, but I really had to think about it more than I thought.
I always get that Sistine Chapel thing I have to do,
Yes,
looking up when you see a circle, and
exactly.
people that are moving around in I said, I can't deal with round. Round was always a hard one for me to even hang on my wall.
Yeah.
It felt like this hole in my wall.
They're becoming much more prevalent here. A lot of artists locally are really embracing the circle. So there's a lot. You see a lot more of them at
I see
shows.
more of it online now too, as well. And the circle doesn't have to be by itself. You can have. They just feel like little bubbles. They like bubbles from the fish tank. And I don't know what it is. There's just, I guess it's how you want to treat the imagery that you've got, and if you buy multiples of them, how you figure them on your wall, right? Or in a space somewhere, maybe. Yeah, it's just they're just different. It's just an odd shape because we're so used to squares and rectangles on our walls, and I think some people are starting to hang three-dimensional objects on their walls more.
Yes.
So the circle, why not? Why not a circle? But difficult to I guess even design around. I'm thinking a little bit, especially if you've only got one. that's the good thing about the artist. You got to buy 2 or 3.
That's right. Yeah, you need a grouping. You absolutely need.
You do sometimes. You need groupings, but
Yeah.
they do create these ship portal holes, like the window in the side of a ship. The round thing. But I love this piece. This piece has a.
Thanks.
And part of it, I guess, is how the foliage of the trees are from like they're drip marks. So they come right from top to bottom. They hold that page, and it creates a depth in there that is different. Because have you found that difficult sometimes to build depth into your work when you paint?
Sometimes I think I'm bad still at keeping the very farthest away to me is still not muted enough and pushed back enough. I think I still need to work on that. But when it comes to trees and leaves and stuff, I don't want to be painting 1,000 leaves. Some people want to do that. That's fine. I just want to have a suggestion that, okay, there's foliage on this thing.
Yeah.
And so there's many ways to try to do that.
Yeah. Oh, very true. I love this piece here too. This is
this piece I like too. This is actually, there's a city not far from me, Cambridge, Ontario. I have family that lives there, and in the middle of a subdivision on a trail, there's just this wetland that it's a preserve, and it also held these fabulous dead trees in it. It was probably flooded out to build the subdivision, and now it's just like a nature preserve kind of place. But I just absolutely loved it. I could paint that a million times.
Right. Yeah. No. I remember seeing a piece by, can't remember, it was one of the group of 7, and I'll go back to that. He actually painted a flooded out area, and it's just a gorgeous watercolor.
It would be nice. Yeah.
And so we've had a few moments where we've had flooded moments, but I think the artist needs to get out and capture those things when they happen.
Yeah. And then this is probably the most recent piece in all this collection here. So it's not as busy or as full as some of my other paintings. Trying to get a little bit more air in sometimes. Sometimes they get a little claustrophobic. So I'm trying to get a little bit more air in sometimes. But this again is from just a local trail, the Royal Botanical Gardens, just walking along. That's Coote's Paradise, sort of the waterway in there that goes into Lake Ontario. Just really close by my house.
I like that the tree is stopped at the top, because that's what gives your work the air. If you went off the top of the page with the tree, it closes it off. But
which typically what I do, I tend to have my trees go off into the.
This one says something completely different when you don't go off, because that says this tree no longer has life above. But if your trees went above, you're leaving. Well,
you don't know what's going on up there. Yeah.
You don't know whether the tree's alive or dead or doing its own thing, right? But it's just little things that you automatically do. I think I love that. The things that your mind thinks about it as you're doing it and just says, that's natural. That's what I want to do. And it turns out nice. So most of the time it turns out great. And there, I just copied a piece of that one painting.
Oh, no, that's great.
That little snippet. So things can be vertical as well. You see that?
They can, yes.
Well, Judy, this has been great. A great, short conversation. My goodness, we could talk all day.
It goes very quickly, but thank you very much. It's been great to chat.
It's been great.
Thank you. I have now my questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. So if somebody, we're going to put your links below so they can find you. And if they're not that intelligent, they'll reach out to the show. So let me ask you this. What does your artwork go for? From like what to what? Like a range?
I would say the range, probably sort of like my little 8x10 guys, are about 200. And they go sort of, the biggest one I think I showed in here was 30 by 60. I think it's $22.50.
Okay. And that's $22.50. Yes. That is great.
American.
So, American.
Canadian .00, US 22.50.
Right. So basically it's $22.50 Canadian, everybody. So that's $4.50 US. So they're bargains. And the shipping is where they get you.
$7,000 in shipping, but the painting.
That's right. The shipping is where they get you on the artwork from Canada.
I started on my website just recently. I have a shop on there for my smaller works, because a lot of those like 9x12 paper I have hundreds of plein air sketches and those little 8x10 things. So I
Right.
just started to put them on my website. And,
Very cool.
you know,
Well, hopefully everybody can go to the link below, go to your website, and you can purchase artwork.
You can, yeah.
And there you go. It was very beautiful. So thank you. We very greatly appreciate it. Yeah, I just come in at the end and I come in the beginning, and that's it. And Paul does all the, the masterful talking, and I'm just like really pretty.
Stephen's the hero. Stephen's always the hero.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I'm never. Trust me.
It's
the
been
guy that
great.
pushes the buttons. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and once again, thank you so much. And everybody will be back next Thursday with another artist from Canada. And Judith, once again, thank you so much. Paul, it's always good to see you. We'll see everybody next week. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.